On our wedding day, my bride insists on wearing an old beat-up watch with the $1 million wedding dress I buy her. I call off the wedding on the spot. She looks at me in shock. You called off the wedding just because of a watch? I take out the divorce agreement and tell her to sign. Yes, because of that watch. Everyone calls me crazy. They cannot believe I would end a 10-year relationship over something so worthless and file for divorce in front of everyone. What followed was the particular chaos that only a wedding venue full of people who all have strong opinions can generate. My father, a man who had spent 30 years in the military and believed that volume and force were interchangeable with authority, slapped me across the face hard enough that I tasted blood at the corner of my mouth and my head snapped sideways. My mother rushed toward me crying. Yasmin's mother grabbed my collar and screamed that I had ruined her daughter's future. Yasmin herself stood in the center of the stage in the $1 million dress with the worn old watch on her wrist, stopped, I noted, at exactly 3:07, and cried with the particular devastation of someone who had not seen this coming and could not locate a script for it. The guests generated opinions in real time. Monster, scumbag, the Walsh family drew the short straw. Poor Yasmin. He must be insane. I watched all of it with the specific calm of a man who has been carrying a weight for a long time and has finally set it down. I called my assistant. Sam, release everything. I'm ready. Then I pushed the divorce papers toward her again and told her to sign. She tore them apart instead, shaking, eyes red, telling me that if I wanted a divorce, I would have to wait until she was dead. I smiled at the stopped watch on her wrist and turned away. My father forced me to my knees. I let him. I got back up. I looked at Yasmin with the cold clarity of a man who has finished grieving something long before the funeral, and I said, "See you in court." The next morning, the internet had decided I was the villain of the century. The clip from the wedding, me, cold-faced, looking down at Yasmin with what the caption writers called contempt, had been cut and recut and memmed into 1,000 variations. Burke Air destroys 10-year love over a broken watch. Heartless Air humiliates devoted fiancé. The stock dropped billions overnight. My father held a press conference to announce he had severed ties with me. Relatives who had been calling me weekly for favors were blocking my number before the press conference finished. Someone found my company address. People threw eggs and paint at the door daily with the dedicated enthusiasm of a community that has located a morally acceptable target. I watched all of this from the penthouse suite of a hotel. Room service on the table, Yasmin's interview playing on the television. She had worn a simple white dress for the cameras. Face pale, eyes swollen, the specific visual language of a wronged woman deployed with professional precision. She told the reporters to please stop attacking Jaden, that their 10 years had been real, that there must be a misunderstanding, that she would wait for him to calm down and they would be together forever. The performance was genuinely excellent. It made my behavior look like a tantrum about accessories and made her look like a saint enduring it. The press loved her. The internet loved her. I watched her work the camera and dialed her number. The reporters in the room realized who was calling and swung every microphone toward the speaker. Yasmin's voice came through overflowing with hope and forgiveness, telling me she didn't blame me for the wedding, that we could start over, that I was overthinking everything. I let her finish. Then I told her calmly to see me at the courthouse tomorrow at 9 and not to be late. Her sharp gasp was audible to every microphone in the room before I ended the call. The press conference collapsed into noise. I could hear the shouting through the phone for a second after I hung up. I ordered another coffee and went back to watching the coverage. She arrived at the courthouse the next morning in black, face drained, tear marks still faintly visible at her eyes. When she saw me, she said my name in a voice that was supposed to reach somewhere in my chest and find something still soft there. I walked past her to the plaintiff's table. The hearing began, and I stated my case cleanly. The judge asked for my reason. Yasmin slammed her hands on the table and began to cry, demanding to know how I could do this over a watch, telling the courtroom that it had been her best friend's keepsake, that she would have honored my memory the same way if anything had happened to me. Several people in the gallery were visibly moved. Her mother shouted from the seats. My father, who had apparently chosen to sit on the opposing side of the courtroom from me, clutched his chest and called me an ingrate. Someone threw an egg that caught me in the side of the head and yolk ran down into my collar. The judge hammered the gavel and called for order. I stated clearly and without elaboration that my reason for divorce was entirely and solely the watch, that there was no other factor. The courtroom generated fresh outrage at the simplicity of it. The judge said my reason was insufficient and did not meet legal standards and asked if I had further evidence. I checked my phone. The screen was dark. Not yet. I said no. The judge reached for the gavel, and then my phone lit up. The notification I had been waiting for since the morning I first understood what the watch meant arrived at that exact moment. synchronized by my assistant Sam with the precision of someone who had been given very specific instructions about timing. I stood and asked the judge for permission to present newly received evidence. He nodded. The courtroom screen came on. What appeared on that screen was the reason the watch had been stopped at 3:07. The reason was not sentiment. The reason was not grief. The reason was that 3-0-7 in the afternoon on the 14th of March, 2 years ago, was the exact time that Yasmin Walsh had been photographed in the lobby of a private medical facility in another city, accompanied by a man whose face the photograph captured clearly despite the cap he was wearing. The man was Leon Marsh, who had died, according to his own family and according to the obituary Yasmin had sobbed through at his funeral, and according to every account she had ever given of the watch she wore in his memory, 8 months before that photograph was taken. Leon Marsh, who was not dead, who had not been dead, who had in fact been very much alive and in regular contact with my wife for the entirety of our engagement, which was the information that Sam had spent 14 months assembling from phone records, travel documents, the medical facility's visitor log, obtained through a source I was not going to name in open court, and 3 separate financial transactions traced from an account Yasmin maintained under her mother's name to a property registered to a shell company whose sole director was Leon Marsh. The watch had stopped at 3:07 because Yasmin had stopped it herself, deliberately to fix a timestamp in place, not as a memorial to a dead man, but as a private signal to a living one, a marker, a reminder of the exact moment their arrangement had been formalized and the performance of grief had begun. I had figured this out not because I was surveilling my fiancée, but because Leon Marsh's supposed obituary had contained a detail about his mother's name that did not match the public record. A small inconsistency I had noticed and filed away with the habit of someone who noticed things, and when I pulled the thread, it had unraveled everything in a sequence so clean and complete that I had needed 14 months simply to document it all properly before I moved. Yasmin's face on the courtroom screen went the specific color of someone watching the architecture of their entire constructed reality collapse in public. She threw herself at the monitor screaming for them to turn it off, and 2 bailiffs had to physically restrain her, which was not the image of a quietly devoted woman wronged by a cold-hearted man, which was the image the press had been printing for 24 hours, and which would be the image they would be printing tomorrow under very different headlines. The courtroom was silent in the way that large spaces go silent when everyone in them has received information that requires a complete reorganization of what they thought they understood. My mother's hand was over her mouth. My father, who had sat across the courtroom from me, who had slapped me on the stage of my own wedding, who had publicly disowned me at a press conference, was sitting very still with an expression I had never seen on his face before, which was the expression of a man who has just realized that every piece of information he acted on had been wrong, and that he had acted on it loudly and in public and on camera. I did not look at him. I looked at the judge. The divorce was granted. All properties, accounts, and assets transferred back. Every financial instrument reversed. Yasmin Walsh left the courtroom with her mother's hand on her arm and a legal team that had, 20 minutes ago, been very confident and was now making phone calls with a different energy. Leon Marsh, when the story broke fully 2 days later, was located in the coastal city where the property had been registered, looking like a man who had not sufficiently planned for the possibility of discovery. His legal situation became its own story very quickly. My father came to the hotel that evening without calling first, which was unusual for him. He was a man who had scheduled every significant conversation of my life. He knocked. I opened the door. He stood in the hallway in the coat he'd worn to the courthouse, and looked at me with the expression he'd had in the courtroom. Still settling, still reorganizing itself into something he could live with, he said he owed me an apology. I said I knew. He said he should have asked me first. I said yes. He asked why I hadn't told him. I said because he would have warned Yasmin. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "Fair." That was the whole conversation. He came in, and we ordered room service and watched the news coverage and said very little, which was, for us, as close to repair as we had ever gotten and closer than I had expected. The stock recovered within a week, helped by the fact that the story had reversed completely and the same outlets that had run Heartless were now running elaborate coverage of the scheme with timelines and photographs and the particular appetite that media has for a narrative that has flipped. I did not do interviews. I let Sam handle the statements. I found I had very little interest in the public portion of what had happened, the coverage, the reversal, the new headlines. What I had interest in was the quiet, the specific quiet of a morning without the background noise of something I had known for 14 months and had not yet been able to act on. It was, I discovered, a remarkably peaceful thing. I kept the coffee hot. I let the phone ring when I didn't recognize the number. I thought about what came next with the unhurried attention of someone who had a great deal of time and no particular reason to rush any of it, and I found that this, more than anything else about the past 2 days, felt most like the beginning of something I could actually build.